So now I'd like to introduce Scott Adams. Scott is an expert in capacity management with over 20 years of experience. At Health Systems, he works closely with performance analysts and capacity planners to understand their key challenges. He analyzes the impact that emerging technologies, services delivery methods, and business processes have on capacity management. And as a reminder, if you have any questions for Scott during this session, please put the question in on the toolbar. There's a section for questions, and please drop it in there and we will get to it. So good morning, Scott.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for joining us. So I want to jump in and talk about how organizations today are not just playing with on-prem and private data centers. Many are taking advantage of the benefits of working with public cloud providers for certain applications. So what are some of the challenges that companies run into as they move to hybrid IT models?
Yeah, there's actually quite a bit for people to be considering, and I'm sure a lot on the in the event today, have encountered some of this. One of the most surprising things, I guess, that we see early on is the choice that the business has available to them now. And when I say that, I'm talking about, with regards to the types of cloud services available. And, we're all familiar now after, 15 years of software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service. But it really does cause some business to take a step back and think about, do I want to continue to offer that mail service myself or my own CRM? And is software as a service an alternative for them? So obviously there's a business case that needs to be constructed around making that decision, but it is a bit of an opportunity for a business to consider, does that make sense for them? Now obviously that varies depending on the size of the organization, the type of business that they're in, industry that they're in as well. But by and large, that's the first, one of the first choices that people maybe don't think of initially when they think about going to hybrid cloud. And then that gives them an opportunity if they're running a data center today. Gives them an opportunity to relieve themselves from some of that responsibility. An organization that's looking to make that sort of transition obviously is going to do that over time more than likely. But it does give them an opportunity to look at that as an opportunity they didn't have before. I think, again, maybe, for this group assembled today, we probably think more along the lines of what does it mean to take advantage of infrastructure as a service or platform as a service. And as we start to look at those, different alternatives for us, obviously there are those decisions that have to be made about what to move, when to move it. Do we start anew with a new service or new service delivery model? And again, that's going to depend a lot on the organization, again, what industry that they're in, and the types of goals and objectives that they have as they move to cloud. So then there's a myriad of other things that come into play around just conducting business, from an IT perspective differently. And again, I know a lot has been talked about governance, compliance, security. Organizations need to take a look at, what sort of privacy regulations do they have, any other types of regulations when they use any one of these three types of services. We know data placement is a big deal, and people have to be very cognizant of where they're placing data, who has access to it, how is it protected. That becomes obviously a little more challenging when you're dealing with a vendor, and that vendor now is housing that information for you. And so, I believe, there has been a lot talked about this reluctance to move into hybrid cloud around privacy and data security. And I think, we're seeing where, organizations are becoming more comfortable with the vendors that are out there supplying us, access to public cloud environments. That makes, again, that a slightly easier move to make, as opposed to, again, if we roll the clock back 5-10 years ago, when we were in the early years of, moving to public cloud. Governance becomes a big deal, and these are process related things, right? So, how do we manage and maintain control, and what level of control needs to be maintained as you start to take advantage of public cloud resources? Some organizations want to try and maintain the processes that they have with their on-premise. Certainly, as we're looking at hybrid and the need to manage both what's in public cloud and what you have on-premise, it makes a lot of sense to continue to look at some of the processes that you have already established and that are working well for your organization. At the same time, I think we see that certain enterprises, again, depending on the industry that they're in, they have opportunities where, depending on, especially, I guess, if we look at, organizations that are sort of in a technical industry, you have folks within the organization that sort of, go off on their own outside of IT, and, a lot of it has been discussed about, shadow IT as well, and the opportunity to lose track of what assets, does the company or the organization have out there, and do we know about all of them? And then obviously going back to that security and privacy concern, if we do have, some folks within the organization that are going outside what the normal established process is, are they placing corporate information out in places that are unsecure or insecure, and also vulnerable for people to get access to? So obviously governance is an important thing there. Most of the larger enterprises that we work with generally see that and understand the need for having those policies and procedures in place as they get started. And I think that's important for anyone that's making that shift, is to to get those policies and procedures determined early on, and not try to play catch up and kind of allow people to get out there, put some of the workload that the organization is doing out in the public cloud, and then have to come back around and try and put some rules and policies around it. It's always more difficult, it seems, to retrofit policies, and that sort of starting to restrict people's access that they may have had previously. So I think there organizationally, it just makes sense to get ahead of that governance and get some of that policy in place. Another thing is, lifecycle management, and I think we'll get maybe into this a little deeper later. But as we're putting services out, onto hybrid cloud, one of the things that obviously changes, and a lot has been talked about this as well, is the cost model changes. You go more to a more operational cost model than a capitalized cost model, and if an organization is doing chargeback, they're familiar with and understand, the costs associated, but many people do get a little bit surprised. And again, a lot has been talked about this quote, sticker shock that people get when they go to public cloud, because they do get that recurring bill every month. And so it becomes important, maybe more important than when you're just on premise, to pay closer attention to your applications and services and where they're at in their life cycle, and ensure that you're reclaiming those resources that are unused and or underutilized, and looking for opportunities to ensure that you're not paying for more than what you need. And when you're just strictly on premise, you have that sunk cost with your IT already. Maybe you're likely doing annual budgeting, but you're sitting with a lot of infrastructure. It's easier to not pay attention to those resources that may be sitting idle and not doing anything. Obviously, every organization is different. Some people are highly attentive to that, and others maybe there's an opportunity here for them to to be more diligent about keeping track of those services and those applications that are out there running. And this all kind of ties back to obviously cost, and that's one of the key tenets of what any organization is trying to achieve, right? In delivering services, either services that are already established or new services. Where do we get the best price performance? At the end of the day, we want to make sure that our customers are happy, whether they're internal or external. They're getting the work is getting done that needs to get done via throughput, and then also we're getting the response times that keep our customers happy and keep them coming back. Which kind of then leads us into again what I suspect this group is interested in understanding where the challenges lie in how do I decide what environment to start to take advantage of in public cloud, and how do I optimize my workload? How do I optimize the environment to handle the workloads that I have as I start to take advantage of public cloud? And this really kind of leans more into the infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. So I'll just stop there for a moment, see if there's any feedback or questions.
That was a lot of great information. And you discussed that basically there's a lot of options and a lot of choices for each company that they have to make when going through a digital transformation. And that's what we see when we're talking a lot with our members and our CMG community, is that most companies are going through a digital transformation. It's different for each company. What that digital transformation is looks different for everyone. So I want to ask you, with that in mind, when organizations look to deploy new applications into the cloud, what should they be doing to ensure that their cloud is the right size?
Yeah, good question. There's really a couple of different ways that people get to the cloud, or start to use the cloud, or start to build hybrid cloud, and that makes a big difference on the choices that you choose to make. And that kind of falls into two major categories. The first one being developing new applications or cloud native, and building for DevOps. And then the second one is equally as important, and that's sort of this lift and shift or steady state applications that I already have and I want to move to the cloud. I'm going to start with the, if your motivation or your objective is to start to use cloud more, public cloud and hybrid cloud, to deploy new applications or cloud native applications, and wanted to start to institute, if you haven't already, DevOps. And it's really common, and what we're seeing is a practice that's been around for a long time with delivering new services or applications, and that is reliance on the development team itself and or a load testing team to give recommendations on what they believe is the right platform to start with, to get the best performance out of the application. With public cloud, that tends to be slightly easier from the perspective of you can go out and test drive. If we look at some of the major infrastructure as a service vendors, you can go out and test drive the different instance sizes fairly easily. And so that can augment your load testing team, can be a resource to augment what your load testing team has done previously on premise, by trying out the various different sizes of instances that are available, to see which ones tend to run the application the way in which you expect it to perform. The challenge there, as it's always been, is that's a time-consuming process, right? And we go out, you go out and you take a look at the various different options that are available from the various cloud vendors. There's a lot of different options for configuration, and so as it's always been, that's a time-consuming process to go through the exercise of trying different sized instances to determine which ones work well for your organization. or your application or service. Now, that's compounded by most of our new application delivery is around building elastic, if you will, applications or services, those that you can take advantage of those features and functions in public cloud, so you can do bursting. And so we're building applications that are sort of compartmentalized, if you will, so that you can add more units and expand your service in a horizontal fashion. And so that, again, introduces a new challenge for some folks where they've not seen or had to deal with applications like that before. And then it does become increasingly more important to right size that instance size such that as you burst or add more or take away, those additional amounts of capacity are coming in are tuned or optimized for your application so it performs as well as it can. So I think that what we need to be continually paying attention to then is like we've had to do in the past, how can we do that more efficiently? And maybe we'll get into this a little later, taking advantage of automated solutions, taking advantage of capacity planning solutions, that software that can emulate those environments, run through those scenarios for you, and quickly identify for you which cloud instance sizes work the best for your application or your workload.
So specifically, the last question was about new applications, and you touched on it a little bit, but it's not just new applications that are being deployed into the cloud. So are there any considerations that should be made prior to moving an existing application to the cloud?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that, again, we're witnessing, and we see a lot of folks starting with, they've got a service or an application or services and applications running on-premise. There is now a corporate initiative or mandate to move that work into a public cloud vendor, and with a business case has been established for doing that. Obviously, then there are goals and criteria and around what the cost structure needs to look like. And at the same time, we as IT professionals need to ensure that the service is going to move over there and perform as well, if not better, and for a lower cost potentially than what is costing us to run on premise. Many people just start with like for like configuration. So again, we work with a lot of folks that are highly virtualized on their on-premise today. And so they're used to looking at things like virtual CPU, amount of memory configured, the various different I/O pathing, and that's a great place to start, right? To look for like for like. If I have this workload running today on this configuration, then if I find a similar size configuration over at a public cloud vendor, I should expect to get similar performance. The thing that we would offer, or the thing that I'd offer today, is this is also an opportunity, and that's classically called lift in, shift in, and I'm not quite sure where that phrase started from, but that's how it's referred to many times. The thing that we would offer is that here again, like I started off with, there's an opportunity because of this transition to take a look at, can we do things differently? And so looking at not only the configuration that you have currently, but what amount of that capacity are you actually using, and what sort of performance are you getting with that configuration? Because as you move to the cloud, you now have the opportunity to reduce your costs and have a real high likelihood that you'll be able to get away with using an instance size that's smaller than what you have configured in your virtual environment on premise. And so that opportunity is there to look for that. Now, obviously, what you would gain from that, one thing is a lower cost if you can find an instance that makes sense for your application or service that doesn't have to match the configuration you currently have. And certainly what you want to ensure is if you do make that decision to do that, that application is going to perform, because one of the things we cannot afford is to move the application to the cloud and have the service suffer as a result. And again, this is where there's opportunities for you to take advantage of software that can predict what that behavior is going to look like without actually having to do the move ahead of time and experience it firsthand. So again, the thing that I would offer here is there's an opportunity. Start with a configuration that you're comfortable with, but then look for the opportunity to tune or optimize to getting the performance that you exactly need for your application or service, and use the software that's available to help you make those choices. Now, I say that, and there are caveats to that, right? Depending on the service or application, if there's, certain requirements for redundancy or failover, those have to be taken into consideration as well. That's where you're going to start to make choices around reserved instances or buying on demand, that sort of thing. So there are those considerations as well. But fortunately, the cloud vendors are supplying, feature functionality that makes all of that possible.
So during this Q&A session, we've talked a lot about companies having to make the decision for their IT infrastructure, basically, and that is the theme of this virtual conference as well. Mm-hmm. So I think we'd also like to know, with digital transformation and the removal of silos, how does better insight and management of IT infrastructure enable an organization to truly transform their processes for better customer experiences?
Yeah, that's a great question, because one of the things that, well, I guess the primary thing, again, just keep coming back to this, right? It's our objective to provide the best price performance for the real work that the business needs to get done. And the thing that is constant for us, I believe, is that things become increasingly more complex. And as we look at hybrid cloud has an inherent complexity in it, because you're dealing with on-premise, you're dealing with your public. You've got a whole new set of infrastructure in the public cloud that you have to become familiar with. There are new processes that we talked a little bit about today with DevOps, and building applications in more of a microservices architecture. So we are adding more complexity to what we already had. And as a result, to manage that complexity, that causes us to, need to find individuals, and it causes us, to have to specialize, because it's very difficult for any one person or group of people to understand every component that makes up this web of things that make up a service in our modern service delivery. And so by specializing, what does that create? That creates potential silos. And so, I think key to your question is, how do we specialize but not create silos or an inability to be effective? And I think, philosophically speaking, that comes to better insight on the part of the people that are managing. I think there is that responsibility for the management team to foster an environment that affords the opportunity to specialize for the purposes of efficiency, and at the same time, not have an environment that creates silos where individuals aren't able to work together to solve those common problems. Now, that said, one of the, sort of the keys for this longer term success for all of us is in the software that we can deliver and the automation that we can provide that can hide that complexity from us. And so I think we do still operate in a time and place where we need both. We need the insight and the management ownership to ensure that within our organizations we're not creating silos and people are free to collaborate and do collaborate well with the opportunity to specialize, and then at the same time balance that with bringing in better software to help with the automation. And we see that, sort of in spades now with these new service delivery models with DevOps, right? It's all about us building the automation to manage the environment for us. We continue to work towards that goal of having more autonomic computing, where the systems can monitor, understand performance capacity needs, and self-manage. And we're getting closer and closer to that every single day. So I think as we continue on that journey to get closer to that notion of autonomic, people and processes make a difference. And so there's still a time. I think we still, again, would say are in a time and place where we have to strike that balance of managing properly, so we don't create environments where we're ineffective, and then at the same time continue to push forward on using software and software automation.
Thank you for all that information. And I think people and processes are, it's another topic that is routinely coming up. I told you that most of our members in our community talk about how they're going through a digital transformation, and that looks different for everyone, but definitely people and processes are top of mind, and it's a very hot topic. I do want to ask you, Help Systems has provided 3 pieces of downloadable content, and on the next slide, we'll let everyone know how you can access that, but it's from our homepage at cmg.org. So I want to ask you, in one of the publications, you encourage the use of the development of technology roadmaps. So what are some of the advantages of these roadmaps, and where have you seen the lack thereof become a massive roadblock?
Yeah, it certainly, it makes sense for all of us, right? I mean, we offer the opportunity to advance as an industry by being forward-looking, and obviously that's what roadmaps do for us. As we start to experience firsthand, all of us, the things that are going on in this transformation, planning for those things that we anticipate are going to come next are extremely important for us, and that generally is pretty self-evident as we experience firsthand some of the challenges that we talked about today. And so I think organizations like CMG and others, right, have the opportunity to sort of foster and think about that and prepare that sort of thought leadership that allows us, to advance, forward in, delivering, services, more reliably and at a lower cost as we go forward. So, yeah, I think it's just look down the road, see what's in front of us, and envision what the future can look like. And without trying to sound too I don't know, too tacky here, we live in this is a really exciting time. The transformation is that we're going through right now is really exciting. We didn't talk today about some of the newer AI technologies that are coming out that are very exciting, that I think feed naturally into this notion of getting closer and closer to autonomic computing. And then we certainly have all sorts of opportunity with the way the public cloud vendors are providing the feature sets that they have to provide that automation, that integration with DevOps. So I guess just continuing to look forward and identify those opportunities, for us to manage the complexity out of the modern service delivery and what's to come in the future. It's really exciting stuff, and obviously, requires us to all spend time thinking about what that future, what we want that future to look like.
I think a really great way to wrap up the session is to also ask you, can help systems help us with those roadmaps?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think what we can do is, like we have been, I guess, supplying CMG and other communities with those thought leadership pieces, providing playbooks, if you will, for how, what are the challenges that other people are seeing, and how can you overcome those challenges. Yeah, I think that's an important piece of what we can do and others can do, to help move the industry and our community forward.
Well, thank you again for joining us today, Scott. Do you want to mention how any of our attendees can get a hold of you? They can read, the website is helpsystems.com. Would you like to direct them to a certain part of the website or a certain email address or contact if they have any questions?
Sure. Yeah. If you have any questions, feel free to, you can reach out to me directly through email, and my email address is my name, scott.adams@helpsystems.com. So yeah, feel free to drop me a line if you want to visit, helpsystems.com. There's a lot of good information out there. I would direct you to the capacity management section right there on the homepage. We'll take you to additional information that that we provide around people making the transition to public cloud, and certainly things to look at that I've briefly touched on today, as far as the challenges that we've seen and opportunities. I would offer back that notion of lift and shift. Again, we talk more about taking that opportunity to to right size as you move, not just move over, but move over and optimize as you go.